Hey, tonight we're going to talk about the time when England tore itself apart, fighting over who should sit on the throne. Spoiler, it wasn't great for anyone involved. You think your year was bad? Let me tell you about 1455. If you're enjoying these bedtime stories about weird history, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. I'm curious where you're listening from. Drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Is it actually bedtime? Now find a cozy spot. Take a slow, deep breath and let your body sink into comfort as we journey back in time together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in mid-15th century England. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, your stomach is already cramping from hunger, and there's straw poking through your thin sleeping mat. You stretch your aching limbs and feel the chill of the early morning air. It's 1455 and unbeknownst to you, England stands on the brink of a conflict that will later be called the Wars of the Roses. But nobody calls it that now. For you, it's just life under a king who seems increasingly unable to rule effectively. Your fingers find a splinter in your palm from yesterday's work. You're a carpenter's apprentice in the town of St. Tulans, about 20 miles north of London. Your master is fair enough, though the work is hard and the pay meager. You pull the splinter out with your teeth and spit it onto the dirt floor. The weak light of dawn filters through the shutters of your small room above the workshop. You can hear your master's family stirring below. Soon they'll expect you downstairs, ready for another day of planing wood, sawing boards, and helping to craft furniture for the wealthier townsfolk and nearby nobility. You rub the sleep from your eyes and try to ignore the persistent gnawing in your belly. The harvest was poor last year, and food prices have climbed steadily. Your weekly wages don't stretch as far as they once did. Nobody seems to know why things have gotten worse in recent years, but you've heard whispers about the king's madness and the greed of his advisors. King Henry V has been on the throne since before you were born. He was just a baby when he inherited the crown in 1422, both of England and France, thanks to the conquests of his father, Henry V. But France has been lost bit by bit during your lifetime. The nobles blame each other for this failure, creating tension that seems to grow with each passing year. Your master was telling you just yesterday about the king's strange illness. For over a year now, Henry has been like a man in a waking sleep, unable to speak or recognize anyone, even his French queen, Margaret of Anjou, or their infant son. During this time, Richard, Duke of York, was named protector of the realm, governing in the king's stead. But a few months ago, the king suddenly recovered. One of the first things he did was dismiss York from his position. This didn't sit well with York or his powerful allies, especially Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, who owns much of the land around St. Albans. You slip on your rough woolen tunic and leather jerkin. The cloth scratches against your skin, but it's sturdy enough to protect you from wood shavings and the occasional misplaced hammer blow. Your shoes are worn but serviceable, the leather patched multiple times by your own hand. As you splash cold water on your face from the basin, you hear a commotion outside. Voices raised, horses whinny, the unusual clanking of metal. You push open the shutters and lean out to see armed men moving through the streets. This is unusual enough to send a chill down your spine despite the May warmth. You hurry downstairs to find your master standing in the doorway of the workshop speaking in hushed tones with a neighbor. "What's happening?" you ask, though you're supposed to speak only when spoken to. Your master turns his face grave. The Duke of York and the S of Warwick and Salisbury are approaching the town with an army. They say the king is here too with the Duke of Somerset and other lords. The neighbor nods vigorously. They say York wants to remove Somerset from the king's council, calls him a traitor who lost France. Your stomach tightens, but not from hunger this time. Even you, a simple apprentice, understand what this means. The tension between York and the king's advisors has finally broken into open confrontation. "Will there be fighting?" you ask, unable to keep the fear from your voice. Your master shrugs. They say York only wants to speak with the king, but why bring armed men to a conversation? The rest of the morning passes in anxious waiting. Work is forgotten as everyone in town gathers news from travelers and messengers. You learn that the king and his party are indeed in St. Albans staying at the abbey. The royal party had been traveling north but stopped here upon hearing of York's approach. By midday, the Duke of York's forces are positioned around the town. You can see their banners from the market square where you've gone to hear the latest news. The royal standard flies over the abbey confirming the king's presence. An older man next to you spits on the ground. I remember when old King Harry, fifth of his name, led us to glory at Agincourt. Now his son lets France slip through his fingers like sand. Quiet fool, hisses another townsman. Want to lose your tongue? The king's men are everywhere. You move away, not wanting to be associated with such dangerous talk. But it's true that Henry V is nothing like his warrior father. He's known to be gentle, pious, and scholarly. Admirable traits in a monk perhaps, but not in a king. During these troubled times, the tension in the town is palpable. Shopkeepers close their shutters. Mothers call children indoors. You should return to the workshop, but curiosity keeps you in the streets, watching the armed men who now patrol St. Albans. Suddenly, trumpets blare from the direction of the abbey. A royal herald appears, reading a proclamation. His Grace, King Henry commands Richard, Duke of York, and his followers to disperse under pain of arrest for treason. The crowd around you murmurs. This doesn't bode well for a peaceful resolution. You decide to head back to the workshop, suddenly fearful of being caught in whatever might unfold. As you turn into your street, you hear shouting from the town's northern edge, followed by a terrible sound you've never heard before. The collective roar of men going into battle. Your master is boarding up the workshop windows when you arrive. His wife hurrying to bring valuables upstairs. Get inside, boy, he shouts when he sees you. There's fighting in the streets. You help him finish securing the workshop, then huddle with the family upstairs. The sounds outside are terrifying. Screams, clashing metal, the thunder of horses' hooves on cobblestones. This isn't just a skirmish. It's a battle being fought right outside your door. Hours pass in fearful waiting. You can smell smoke and hear the splintering of wood as doors are broken down somewhere nearby. Your master's wife leads her children in prayer, but you notice his hand never strays far from the wood-cutting axe he's brought upstairs. As evening approaches, the sounds of battle diminish. Eventually, your master risks looking out the window. The Duke's men hold the streets, he reports. They wear the white rose of York. Later, you learn what happened. The Duke of York's forces broke through the town's defenses and fought their way to the abbey. King Henry, watching the battle from a nearby house, was wounded in the neck by an arrow. The Duke of Somerset, York's bitter enemy, was killed along with several other noble supporters of the king. In the days that follow, you see the Duke of York and his allies leading the wounded king through the streets, treating him with deference while effectively holding him captive. York is once again named protector of the realm. The Battle of St. Albans, as people are already calling it, has left about 60 men dead, a shocking number for a conflict fought entirely within a small town. Most of the dead are nobles and their retainers. Not common folk, but several townspeople were killed or injured when caught in the fighting. Your master's workshop suffers only minor damage. A broken door that you help repair. But the battle has changed something fundamental in England. For the first time, noble disagreements have erupted into open warfare with the king himself caught in the middle. As you sweep wood shavings at the end of a long day of repairs, your master sits heavily on a bench beside you. My grandfather told me stories of the last time nobles fought each other for the crown, he says quietly. When Henry Bolingbroke took the throne from Richard II and became Henry IVTH. That was more than 50 years ago. He said England ran with blood then. You stop sweeping, the implications sinking in. Do you think this is the start of something like that? He shrugs, suddenly looking much older. I pray not, but I fear York and the king's other lords have crossed a line today that cannot be uncrossed. They've shown that disputes can be settled with swords rather than words in council. That night you lie on your straw mattress, the day's events replaying in your mind. The world seems less certain than it did yesterday. The king Once a distant figure of authority, now seems vulnerable, a pawn in the game of powerful men. Your eyelids grow heavy as fatigue overtakes worry. Tomorrow will bring more work as the town repairs itself. Life must go on regardless of which noble wears a crown or sits at the king's council table. As you drift towards sleep, you wonder if the Battle of St. Albans will be remembered as an isolated incident or the beginning of something much worse. The thought follows you into uneasy dreams filled with white roses, stained red with blood. The battle in St. Albans is soon the talk of the entire kingdom. In the weeks and months that follow, you hear constant rumors and stories as travelers pass through town. Some say the Duke of York will soon be king. Others insist he is loyal to Henry V, VI, and only wants to rid the court of bad advisors like the now dead Duke of Somerset. By the autumn of 1455, Richard of York is firmly established as protector of the realm. With the king seemingly recovered, but passive, allowing York to govern in his name, your life returns to a predictable rhythm of work, meals, and sleep. The harvest is better this year, so food prices have dropped slightly. You're no longer constantly hungry, which feels like a luxury after the lean months. You've been given more responsibility in the workshop as your skills improve. Today, you're carefully carving decorative panels for a cabinet commissioned by a wealthy merchant. The work requires concentration, and your hands are steady as you guide the chisel along marked lines in the oak. Your master enters, brushing snow from his cloak. It's February 1456 now, and winter has settled heavily across England. Put that aside, he tells you. We've had a new commission. Repairs to the abbey where the fighting damaged the woodwork. You carefully set down your tools. Has the abbey finally saved enough money for repairs? He shakes his head. The Duke of York himself is paying part of his penance. They say he's been generous in making amends for the battle. This doesn't surprise you. Despite the violence that brought him to power, York has governed capably since taking control. Order has been restored and justice seems to be administered fairly, even in St. Albans, where the battle's memory is still fresh. Many speak favorably of York's firm hand guiding the kingdom. The next morning, you accompany your master to the abbey to assess the needed repairs. The winter air bites at your exposed skin, making your nose and ears ache with cold. Your breath forms clouds in front of your face as you walk through the snow-covered streets. The abbey is imposing, its stone walls rising high above the surrounding buildings. Inside, it's surprisingly warm with braziers placed throughout to combat the winter chill. A monk leads you through to show the damaged areas. As you're examining splintered wood panels near the altar, a commotion at the main doors draws your attention. Several richly dressed men enter, surrounded by guards wearing the royal livery. The monk beside you drops to his knees. "The king," he whispers. You quickly follow suit, keeping your eyes down as protocol demands. Through your lashes, you catch glimpses of the royal party. At the center walks a tall, thin man in his mid-30s, King Henry V, VI himself. His face is serene but oddly vacant, and he moves as if in a dream, guided by those around him. Beside him is a woman whose bearing marks her clearly as Queen Margaret of Anjou. Though not conventionally beautiful, her face is striking with intelligence burning in her eyes. She holds the king's arm possessively, almost steering him. They pass within feet of where you kneel, close enough that you can smell the queen's French perfume and hear her whispering to the king in accented English. He doesn't respond, his gaze fixed somewhere in the middle distance. Once they've moved to pray at the altar, your master motions for you to continue your work, though more quietly now. As you measure damaged wood and make notes, you can't help overhearing fragments of conversation among the royal party. "York must be removed," the queen says, her voice low but intense. "He undermines us at every turn." "Patience, your grace," counsels an older nobleman. "The lords no longer support his protectorship now that the king is well. His power wanes already." You realize you're witnessing history unfold. The queen is actively working against York despite his official position. The battle lines of power are being drawn right before your eyes. Later that evening, back in the workshop, your master warns you to forget anything you might have heard at the abbey. It's dangerous to know too much about the affairs of the great lords, he cautions, his voice serious, especially in times like these. You nod, but the Queen's determined face and forceful words stay with you. You sense that the peace established after St. Albans is more fragile than it appears. Over the next few months, news filters through to St. Albans that confirms your suspicions. In February 1456, barely a week after you saw them at the Abbey, the King and Queen traveled to Greenwich, where a great council was called. There York was stripped of his protectorship, though he retained his position on the King's Council. By summer, the Queen has effectively taken control of the government, ruling through the King. She shows remarkable political skill for a woman of just 26 years, especially a foreigner in the complex world of English politics. But her growing power makes York and his allies increasingly uneasy. You turn 17 in the autumn of 1456, and your apprenticeship is in its final year. Soon you'll be a journeyman carpenter, free to seek work where you choose. You've been saving what little money you can, dreaming of perhaps one day having your own workshop. Winter comes again, and with it news that the Queen has moved the court away from London to Coventry, deep in the heart of lands controlled by nobles loyal to her. It's a clever strategic move that isolates York and his supporters. In March 1458, nearly 3 years after the Battle of St. Albans, word comes of a grand ceremony of reconciliation in London. The King has brought together York and the nobles whose relatives died at St. Albans in a public display at St. Paul's Cathedral. They walk hand in hand in a procession meant to symbolize the end of their feud. Your master scoffs when he hears the news. Wolves don't change their nature by walking in a church, he says. They've just agreed to bare their teeth at each other more politely. His skepticism proves well-founded. By the following year, tensions have risen again. The Queen continues to consolidate power, appointing her favorites to key positions and gradually pushing York and his allies to the margins. In September 1459, you're delivering a set of chairs to a merchant's house when you hear a town crier announcing news. Open fighting has broken out again between York's forces and the royal army. At a place called Blorheath in Staffordshire, the Earl of Sperry, York's ally, defeated a larger royal force. The merchant pays you quickly, his mind clearly on the news rather than the furniture. It's starting again, he says grimly. God help us all. Within weeks, more news arrives. York, Sperry, and Warwick have been defeated at Leford Bridge near Lello. Unable to match the royal army's strength, they fled. York and his second son Edmund to Ireland, while Warwick, Salisbury, and York's eldest son, Edward, escaped to Koala, England's last possession in France. In November, a parliament is called at Coventry that attains York and his chief supporters, declaring them traitors, sentencing them to death if captured, and confiscating their lands and titles. People are calling it the Parliament of Devils. Your master grows increasingly worried as winter approaches. If York is truly finished, then those who supported him, even in small ways, may face retribution, he confides one evening. He had done business with York's officials after the Battle of St. Albans, and fears this connection might be remembered. But York is far from finished. In June 1460, the ears of Warwick and Salisbury, along with York's son Edward, Earl of March, land at Sandwich in Kent with a small army. Rather than being opposed, they are welcomed by many. Their force grows as they march toward London, which opens its gates to them without resistance. The King has gathered an army at Northampton, and Warwick meets him there with his forces on July 10, 1460. The news reaches St. Tls the following day. Warwick has won a decisive victory and captured King Henry once again. Some of the King's most loyal supporters have been killed, and Queen Margaret has fled north with their young son. Within weeks, Richard of York returns from Ireland and makes a stunning claim before Parliament. Rather than simply seeking restoration of his offices and lands, he formally claims the throne itself, arguing that his lineage gives him a better right to rule than Henry V's 6. After 2 weeks of deliberation, Parliament reaches a compromise. Henry will remain king for his lifetime, but York and his heirs will succeed him, disinheriting Henry's son, Prince Edward. Queen Margaret, however, will never accept her son's disinheritance. In December 1460, her forces confront York at Wakefield in Yorkshire. The battle is a disaster for York. He is killed along with his second son, Edmund, and the Earl of Salisbury, who is captured and executed afterward. You hear that York's head was displayed on the gates of the city of York, adorned with a paper crown in mockery of his ambitions. The Queen's army moves south, defeating Warwick at the Second Battle of St. Albans on February 17, 1461. King Henry, who had been in Warwick's custody, is found sitting under a tree during the battle, singing to himself, seemingly oblivious to the men dying around him. The town suffers during this second battle. Buildings are damaged, shops looted. Your master's workshop is spared the worst, but a stray arrow shatters one of the newly installed windows. As you sweep up the broken glass, you reflect on how your life has become entwined with these great events, whether you wished it or not. Queen Margaret's army is poised to march on London, but the city refuses to open its gates, fearful of the northern soldiers who have already earned a reputation for looting and violence as they moved south. Meanwhile, York's eldest son, Edward, Earl of March, has won a battle against Welsh Lancastrian forces at Mortimer's Cross. He joins forces with the remains of Warwick's army and enters London unopposed. On March 4, 1461, Edward is proclaimed King Edward Thorpe in London. At just 19 years old, he becomes England's new monarch, deposing Henry V, who has ruled, however, ineffectively for nearly 40 years. Less than a month later, on March 29th, Edward leads his army north and confronts Queen Margaret's forces at Towton in Yorkshire. What follows is the bloodiest battle ever fought on English soil. For hours, men struggle in a snowstorm, and when it ends, perhaps 28,000 men lie dead in the snow and mud. Edward is victorious. Queen Margaret, King Henry, and their son flee to Scotland. The House of York has triumphed, and the first phase of what will one day be called the Wars of the Roses has ended. As spring arrives in St. Albans, you complete your apprenticeship and become a journeyman carpenter. The new king's coronation is set for June, and there's talk of prosperity returning under his rule. Your master offers you continued employment, which you gratefully accept after the uncertainty of recent years. This small stability feels precious. That night, as you lie in bed in your small room above the workshop, you feel the weight of all you've witnessed lifting slightly. Perhaps now England will know peace under the young, charismatic King Edward IV. As your eyes grow heavy, you wonder if you might one day tell your own apprentices about living through these tumultuous times, about seeing kings and queens with your own eyes, about how the high politics of nobles touched even the lives of common folk like yourself. You drift into sleep, your breathing slowing, your body releasing the tensions of the day. Tomorrow is a new beginning for you and for England under its new Yorkist king. The summer sun beats down on your neck as you work, sweat trickling beneath your collar. It's 1462 and the heat is relentless. You've been a journeyman carpenter for over a year now, still working in your former master's shop in St. Albans, but with newfound respect and better pay. Your callous hands move with practiced efficiency as you shape a length of oak for a merchant's new bed frame. Life under the new Yorkist King Edward IV has brought a measure of stability that England hasn't known for years. At 20 years old, King Edward is remarkably different from his predecessor. Where Henry V was pious, withdrawn, and sickly, Edward is tall, vigorous, and charismatic. They say he stands nearly 6 feet 4 inches and a giant among men with the physical presence to match his royal authority. Water. You look up to see Thomas, your master's 14-year-old son and newest apprentice, holding out a wooden cup. You take it gratefully, drinking deeply. The water is cool, drawn from the shop's deep well, and it soothes your parched throat. Is it true what they're saying in the market? Thomas asks, his eyes wide. That Queen Margaret is planning to invade from Scotland. You hand back the empty cup, wiping your mouth with the back of your hand. There are always rumors, but yes, the northern lords who supported King Henry are still causing trouble. I heard the Earl of Warwick is riding north to deal with them. The Earl of Warwick, Richard Neville, known increasingly as the kingmaker for his role in putting Edward on the throne, has become the second most powerful man in England. His loyalty to the Yorkist cause seems unshakable, and his military prowess is legendary. You return to your work, but Thomas lingers. Father says the old king is hiding in Scotland with his French queen. Do you think they'll try to take back the throne? Your father should be careful what he says and to whom? You caution, lowering your voice. The wars may not be over, and loose talk can be dangerous. Thomas nods solemnly and returns to his sweeping. You've tried to mentor the boy as others once mentored you. Life has improved under King Edward's rule. Food is more plentiful. Trade is flowing again, and there's steady work for skilled craftsmen, but you've learned that fortunes can change swiftly in these uncertain times. As evening approaches, you finish your day's work and wash your hands and face in a bucket of clean water. Tiny splinters embedded in your palms resist your scrubbing, a permanent feature of a carpenter's hands. Your muscles ache pleasantly from honest labor, and your stomach rumbles in anticipation of supper. You've rented a small room above the baker's shop, 3 streets over. It's modest, but your own, with a straw mattress that doesn't have quite as many lumps as the one in your apprentice quarters. The smell of fresh bread permeates everything you own, but that's hardly a complaint. As you walk through the streets of St. Albans, you notice a group of travelers outside the inn. Merchants, by the look of them, their horses laden with packs. Trade has picked up considerably under Edward's rule. The king understands commerce in a way his predecessor never did, and merchants have become some of his strongest supporters. You nod to familiar faces as you pass. At 23, you're no longer a boy, but a man with a respectable trade. Young women notice you now, and you've been saving money with thoughts of marriage someday. First, though, you need your own workshop, or at least the prospect of one. Inside your room, you light a candle and unwrap the bread, cheese, and sausage you purchased earlier. As you eat, you can hear the baker's family. Below, their muffled voices and occasional laughter, a comforting backdrop to your solitary meal. You've just finished eating when there's a knock at your door. It's Daniel, a fellow journeyman who works for the town's other carpenter. Come have a drink, he urges. A merchant from London is at the Bull Inn with news from the capital. Curious, you agree, grabbing your cloak despite the summer warmth. The nights can still grow cool, and you've developed a slight cough recently that worries you. The Bull Inn is crowded and noisy, thick with the smell of ale, sweat, and woods. You find seats near enough to the merchant to hear his news, but far enough from the fire to avoid the worst of the heat. The merchant, a prosperous-looking man in his 40s with a London accent, holds court among the locals, eager for news. The king is consolidating his position. He tells his rapt audience. The northern rebellions are being crushed one by one, but the most interesting news is about the king's personal life. He pauses dramatically, making sure he has everyone's attention. They say he's the handsomest king England has ever had, and quite the ladies' man. The court matchmakers have been busy seeking a suitable royal bride, a French princess perhaps, or a Burgundian heiress. Someone to cement an alliance against the Scots who harbor our former king. You sip your ale, which is watery but cool. Marriage alliances have always been how kingdoms secure peace and forge alliances. It's no different for craftsmen like yourself, though the stakes are considerably lower. Just last month, you watched the rope maker's daughter marry the son of a tanner, uniting 2 prosperous local families. The news from London continues to flow along with the ale. There's talk of a grand tournament to be held next spring of French pirates harassing English shipping, of the continuing efforts to capture Henry VI, who remains elusive in his Scottish exile. As the night deepens, you feel the day's labor catching up with you. Your eyelids grow heavy, and you stifle a yawn. Bidding Daniel good night, you make your way back through the darkened streets, guided by the light of a nearly full moon. In your small room, you remove your shoes and outer clothes before lying down on your mattress. The distant sounds of the inn's revelers mingle with the soft hooting of an owl somewhere nearby. Your body relaxes into the familiar contours of your bed, and sleep comes quickly. The years pass with surprising swiftness. It's now the spring of 1464, and you've established yourself as one of the most reliable carpenters in St. Albans. Your former master has grown arthritic, leaving more of the work and profit to you. Thomas has developed into a skilled apprentice under your guidance, his gangly teenage frame filling out with muscle earned through daily labor. The workshop has been busy with orders. King Edward's reign has brought prosperity, and even common folk can afford better furnishings for their homes. You've become known for your detailed carving work, which commands premium prices from wealthy merchants and minor nobility. Today, you're completing a commission for the Abbot of St. Bulbins, an intricately carved wooden screen for a private chapel. The design incorporates roses, a nod to the Yorkist symbol without being overtly political. The church tries to remain neutral in secular conflicts, though the current abbot has York sympathies. As you work, your mind wanders to the news that arrived yesterday. King Edward, now 22, has shocked the kingdom by announcing his marriage to a commoner, Elizabeth Woodville, a widow, with 2 sons from her first marriage. The marriage had been kept secret for months before the announcement. The Earl of Warwick is reportedly furious. He had been in France negotiating a marriage alliance with a French princess when Edward revealed his secret bride. The diplomatic embarrassment was considerable. What do you think of the king's marriage? Thomas asks, interrupting your thoughts. He's applying beeswax to a completed section of the screen. The sweet smell filling the workshop. You consider your answer carefully. Kings rarely marry for love. You say it's unusual, to be sure. The Queen's family, the Woodvilles, will likely rise high at court now. Father says Warwick won't stand for it. He says there'll be trouble. You frown. Your father should guard his tongue, but he may be right. The Earl of Warwick isn't a man to cross lightly. The political implications of the king's marriage are beyond your direct concern, but you've lived through enough turmoil to know that events at court eventually ripple outward to affect even ordinary craftsmen like yourself. Later that week, you're summoned to the home of Sir James Tyrrell, a minor knight with lands near St. Albans. His steward has commissioned furniture for the main hall, 2 long tables and benches to match. Sir James's manor house is modest compared to the great castles of the high nobility, but it's still imposing to someone of your station. You're led through a stone entrance hall into a chamber where the knight himself waits to approve the designs. You come highly recommended, carpenter, Sir James says, examining your sketches with a critical eye. He's a hard-faced man in his 30s, his left cheek marked by an old sword scar. Thank you, Sir James. I apprenticed under Master William, who taught me well. The knight nods absently. Still studying your drawings. These will do, but I want the tile coat of arms carved here and here. He points to the table ends and none of that Yorkist rose nonsense. My family has Lancastrian connections. You tense slightly, but maintain a neutral expression. It's rare for anyone to openly claim Lancastrian sympathies these days, though the old loyalties haven't disappeared entirely. As you wish, sir. I have no political leanings myself. I merely work the wood. Sir James gives you a sharp look. Wise policy for a craftsman. See that you maintain it. You leave with the commission secured, but a sense of unease. The knight's open reference to Lancastrian ties suggests that not everyone has accepted Edward's rule as permanent. There are still those who hope for Henry V's sixth restoration. However unlikely it might seem at present. The summer of 1464 brings news of more Yorkist victories. In the north, Warwick's brother, John Neville, defeats the remaining Lancastrian forces at Hedgeley Moor and Hexham. Henry V's narrowly escapes capture, but many of his supporters are executed after the battles. By autumn, the former king is finally captured while hiding at Wington Hall in Lancaster. He's brought to London and imprisoned in the Tower, effectively ending the Lancastrian resistance. Queen Margaret and her son remain in exile, but without Henry, their cause seems hopeless. England settles into an uneasy peace over the next few years. You prosper in your trade, finally saving enough to open your own small workshop in 1467. Thomas comes with you as your first employee, his apprenticeship complete. Together, you build a reputation for quality work throughout Hertfordshire. You marry Mary, the daughter of a local weaver, in the spring of 1468. She's a practical, good-humored woman with skilled hands and a warm smile. By summer, she's expecting your first child, and the future looks bright. But beneath the surface of national prosperity, tensions are building at court. The Earl of Warwick grows increasingly resentful of the Woodville family's influence over the king. Elizabeth's father, brothers, and sons from her first marriage have all received titles, lands, and advantageous marriages, often at the expense of older noble families. Warwick finds an unexpected ally in the king's own brother, George, Duke of Clarence. Young, ambitious, and jealous of Edward's power, Clarence is easily swayed by Warwick's suggestion that he would make a better king than his brother. In July 1469, while working on a commission in London, your first visit to the capital, you witness firsthand the breakdown of the Yorkist alliance. Rebels in Yorkshire, secretly supported by Warwick, defeat royal forces at Edgecote. Days later, King Edward himself is captured by Warwick's men while hunting near Northampton. London buzzes with rumors. Some say Edward will be deposed. Others that he'll be forced to rule under Warwick's direction. The markets grow nervous, and some merchants begin hoarding goods, fearing another civil war. You hurry to complete your work, anxious to return to St. Albans and your pregnant wife. The political chaos in London makes you uneasy, reminding you too much of the uncertainty before the first battles of the wars. Will there be fighting in the streets again? Ask your assistant, a local London boy hired to help transport materials. God forbid. You reply, remembering all too clearly the Battle of St. Bulbran's 14 years earlier. But best we finish quickly nonetheless. Before you can leave London, however, news arrives that Edward has been released. Warwick found himself unable to govern without the king's authority, as rebellions broke out across the country. Reluctantly, the Earl restored Edward to power, though their relationship is irreparably damaged. You return to St. Albans to find Mary, well, but worried. Your son is born in late September. A healthy boy you name William after your old master. Holding him in your arms, tiny and perfect, with wisps of dark hair like his mother's, you feel a fierce desire to protect him from the uncertainties of the world. The winter of 1469 to 1470 is harsh. Snow falls early and often, and the cold seeps through even the thickest walls. Work slows as people conserve their money for food and firewood. You and Mary are comfortable enough with your savings, but you worry about the coming year if commissions remain scarce. Your workshop is cold despite the small fire you maintain. Your breath forms clouds in the air as you work on a simple cradle for a local merchant's expected child. The repetitive motion of sanding the wood keeps your hands warm, though your feet grow numb on the frozen ground. Mary enters, bundled against the cold, with baby William wrapped snugly against her chest. There's news, she says, her expression troubled. A royal herald passed through the market. Warwick and Clarence have rebelled again. You put down your tools, wiping sawdust from your hands. When last month they fled to France after their plot was discovered. And there's worse. They've allied with Queen Margaret. You stare at her in disbelief. Warwick and Margaret of Anjou. They've been bitter enemies for years. Warwick killed her supporters and helped dethrone her husband. Mary shrugs. Politics makes strange bedfellows. My mother always said the French king brokered the alliance. Warwick's daughter is to marry Margaret's son, and they plan to restore Henry V to the throne. The news is stunning. Warwick, once the staunchest Yorkist, has switched sides completely. His influence and military skill, now turned against Edward, represent a severe threat to the king's rule. Throughout the early months of 1470, news of the coming invasion dominates public discussion. Edward prepares his defenses, but he's undermined by continued plots within England. In September, Warwick and Clarence land in the southwest with a small army. Edward, campaigning in the north against a separate rebellion, finds himself in danger of being trapped between hostile forces. With few options, he and his loyal brother Richard, Duke of Gloucester, flee to the Netherlands, seeking refuge with Edward's brother-in-law, the Duke of Burgundy. Warwick enters London in triumph. Henry V, weak and confused after years of imprisonment, is restored to the throne in what becomes known as the Redemption. But everyone knows the real power lies with Warwick and Queen Margaret, who remains in France, suspicious of her new ally. The political upheaval affects your business as uncertainty returns to England. Commissions dry up as people once again hoard their resources, unsure what the coming months will bring. You're forced to let Thomas go, though you promise to rehire him when circumstances improve. I don't understand how this happened so quickly, Mary says one night as you sit by the fire in your small home, William asleep in his cradle nearby. King Edward seems so firmly established. You stoke the fire, watching the sparks rise up the chimney. Power is more fragile than it appears. Warwick put Edward on the throne. Now he's taken him off it again. They don't call him the kingmaker for nothing. Will Edward return, do you think? You consider the question carefully. I believe he will try. He's young, strong, and he has a wife and children to fight for now, and Burgundy may support him to counter French influence. The winter of 1470-1471 is one of watchful waiting. Warwick rules England in Henry's name, but his position is precarious. Queen Margaret delays her return from France, still distrustful of the man who once defeated her armies. Clarence, realizing that his switch to the Lancastrian side has left him far from the throne, begins secret communications with his exiled brother. In March 1471, Edward lands at Ravenspur in Yorkshire with a small force. Rather than facing immediate opposition, he finds his support growing as he marches south. He publicly claims he only wants his dukedom of York restored, not the crown, though few believe him. Clarence, in a final betrayal of Warwick, abandons the Lancastrian cause and rejoins his brother with his considerable forces. Strengthened by this reinforcement, Edward moves swiftly toward London. Warwick marches to intercept him, but Edward outmaneuvers his former mentor. On April 14, 1471, Easter Sunday, their armies meet at Barnet, just north of London. The battle is fought in thick fog, causing confusion on both sides. When it clears, Warwick lies dead on the field, and the Yorkist forces are victorious. The kingmaker is no more, but Edward's restoration isn't complete. Queen Margaret and her son have finally landed in England on the very day of Barnet. Learning of Warwick's defeat, they gather remaining Lancastrian supporters and march toward Wales, hoping to build their strength. Edward pursues them relentlessly, forcing a final confrontation at Tewkesbury on May 4th. The battle is decisive. The Lancastrian army is destroyed and Prince Edward Henry V's only son and heir is killed either during the fighting or shortly afterward. Queen Margaret is captured, her cause in ruins. 2 weeks later, as Edward re-enters London in triumph, Henry V dies in the Tower supposedly of melancholy upon hearing of his son's death. Though few doubt he was murdered on Edward's orders, the Lancastrian line is extinguished. Edward IV sits once more upon the throne of England, his position now stronger than ever. In St. Albans, life gradually returns to normal through the summer of 1471. Commissions begin to flow again as people's confidence in the future is restored. You rehire Thomas and take on a new apprentice as well. Your workshop grows busy with orders for everything from simple stools to elaborate cabinets for wealthy merchants. William takes his first steps in June, toddling unsteadily across the workshop floor while you watch proudly. Mary discovers she's expecting again, and your happiness feels complete. One warm evening in August, you close the workshop early and take your family to the town's summer fair. William, now nearly 2, squeals with delight at the jugglers and minstrels. Mary, her pregnancy just beginning to show, leans contentedly against your shoulder as you sit on a grassy bank watching the entertainments. We've been fortunate, you say, your arm around her waist, to have lived through such troubled times, yet prospered. She nods, her hand finding yours. Do you think the wars are truly over now? You watch William trying to catch a butterfly, his face alight with joy. I hope so. Edward seems secure on his throne with no real rivals left. Perhaps England can know peace for a while. As twilight deepens, lanterns are lit throughout the fairground, casting a warm glow over the festivities. The air fills with the smell of roasting meat and sweet pastries. A group of musicians begins to play and people start to dance on the village green. You lead Mary in a simple country dance, both of you laughing as you try to avoid jostling her growing belly. William watches from the arms of a neighbor woman clapping, his hands to the music's rhythm. Later, as you carry your sleeping son home through the darkened streets, you reflect on the journey that brought you here. From an apprentice witnessing the first battle of St. Albans to a master craftsman with your own family and business. Through all the kingdom's turmoil, you've managed to build a good life. At home, you lay William in his bed while Mary prepares a small supper of bread, cheese, and cold meat. You eat together in comfortable silence, tired but content after the day's festivities. As you prepare for bed, removing your shoes and outer clothes, you hear the distant church bells marking the night hours. The sound is reassuring, a constant in a world that has seen so much change. Mary is already asleep when you slip under the blanket beside her. Her breathing is deep and even, one hand resting protectively over her belly. You place your hand gently over hers, feeling the slight roundness that will grow over the coming months. Outside, a light summer rain begins to fall, pattering softly on the thatched roof. The sound is soothing, and your body relaxes into the mattress. Your eyelids grow heavy as the day's exertions catch up with you. Before sleep claims you entirely, you offer a silent prayer of thanks for your family's safety and a plea for continued peace in the realm. King Edward IV sits securely on his throne, the Lancastrian threat extinguished. Perhaps now, finally, England can heal from its wounds and look toward a more stable future. As you drift into dreams, you don't know that the peace will last less than a decade, before new troubles arise. You can't foresee that Edward's brother, Richard, will one day seize the throne from Edward's sons, or that a distant Lancastrian cousin named Henry Tudor will eventually end the Yorkist dynasty at Bosworth Field. Tonight, in this moment, there is only the gentle rain, your wife's warmth beside you, and the promise of tomorrow in a kingdom at peace. Your breathing slows, your muscles unwind, and sleep envelopes you like a familiar blanket, carrying you into dreams of workshops filled with sunlight and children's laughter. Your daughter, Elizabeth, is born in the winter of 1471. A tiny bundle with a shock of dark hair and a surprisingly strong cry. Mary recovers well from the birth, and soon your small home is filled with the gentle chaos of a growing family. William now too regards his baby sister with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, occasionally trying to poke her awake when she's sleeping, much to your dismay. The years following King Edward's restoration in 1471 bring peace and prosperity to England. Your carpentry business thrives as the economy strengthens under the king's steady hand. By 1475, you've expanded your workshop, employing 3 journeymen and 2 apprentices. Your reputation for quality craftsmanship has spread throughout Hertfordshire, bringing commissions from wealthy merchants and minor nobility. You're approaching your 34th birthday now. No longer the young apprentice who witnessed the first battle of St. Albans 20 years ago. Your hair has begun to thin at the temples and the first gray strands have appeared in your beard. Years of working with heavy timber have left your shoulders slightly rounded, though your arms remain strong from daily labor. On a crisp autumn morning in 1475, you're examining a large oak log recently delivered to your workshop. The wood is of excellent quality, straight-grained and free from knots, perfect for the 4-poster bed commissioned by Sir Robert Stanley, a knight recently returned from France. King Edward had led an expedition to France earlier that year, intending to press his claim to the French throne. But rather than fighting, he negotiated the Treaty of Pecquigny, accepting an immediate payment of 75,000 crowns and an annual pension of 50,000 crowns from the French King Louis the Fins. Many nobles considered this a dishonorable settlement, but merchants and craftsmen like yourself welcomed the continued peace. A master? One of your apprentices, Peter, approaches hesitantly. A messenger has arrived from London. He says he represents the royal household. You straighten, wincing at the twinge in your lower back. Show him in. The messenger is a lean, efficient-looking man in the royal livery. He carries a sealed letter which he hands to you with a slight bow. Master Carpenter, I bring a commission from the King's Chamberlain. His Grace requires furnishings for his hunting lodge at Waltham Forest. Your name was recommended by Sir James Tyrrell. You remember Sir James from years ago, the knight with Lancastrian sympathies who nonetheless survived the political upheavals. Apparently, he has done more than survive. He now moves in royal circles. The commission is substantial. Tables, chairs, storage chests, and bed frames for the king's hunting retreat. The work will take months and require additional workers. But the payment offered is generous. You accept without hesitation. That evening, you share the news with Mary as she serves a hearty stew of beef and vegetables, the savory aroma filling your modest but comfortable home. The royal household, she exclaims, her eyes widening. That's a significant honor, husband. You nod, breaking off a piece of brown bread to dip in your stew. It will mean some time spent at Waltham Forest overseeing the installation. William, now 6 and full of questions, looks up from his food. Will you see the king, father? Perhaps, you reply, tousling his hair. King Edward often hunts at Waltham. Elizabeth, 4 years old and already showing signs of her mother's practical nature, is more concerned with immediate matters. Will you bring us back sweetmeats from London? You laugh. Yes, little one, and perhaps a small wooden toy if you're good. After the children are asleep, you and Mary sit by the fire discussing the changes this royal commission might bring. Your workshop is already prosperous by town standards, but royal patronage could elevate your business to new heights. We could afford a larger home, Mary suggests, her fingers busy with mending, perhaps even one of the stone houses near the abbey. You nod, watching the flames dance in the hearth. And better education for the children. William shows promise with numbers. He might train as a clerk or scribe if he doesn't wish to follow me in carpentry. It's a future neither of you could have imagined growing up. You, the son of a minor tanner. Mary, the daughter of a weaver. The relative peace of Edward's second reign has allowed for such dreams. A welcome change from the uncertainty of the war years. The spring of 1476 finds you at Waltham Forest, overseeing the installation of the furnishings your workshop has produced over the winter. The hunting lodge is impressive, built of stone with high ceilings and expansive windows that allow light to flood the rooms. The king has spared no expense in creating this retreat from court pressures. You're directing the placement of an elaborately carved table when a commotion outside draws your attention. Moments later, the lodge steward hurries in. The king approaches. Everyone must clear the main hall. You gather your workers and retreat to an antechamber, heart pounding with unexpected nerves. Though you've lived your entire life under various kings, you've never actually been in the presence of one. The sounds of arrival fill the lodge. Voices, footsteps, the clinking of armor. Peering carefully through the partially open door, you catch your first glimpse of Edward Thor as he strides into the hall. The king is magnificent. Even at 34, tall and broad-shouldered, he dominates the space with his physical presence. Though he's put on weight in recent years, evidence of his legendary appetite for food and drink, he still moves with the grace of the warrior who won his crown on the battlefield. His golden hair and beard catch the sunlight streaming through the windows, giving him an almost divine glow. Edward surveys the hall with evident pleasure, nodding approval at the furnishings. Excellent work, he declares, running a hand over the table you just installed. Who crafted these pieces? The steward gestures toward your hiding place. A master carpenter from St. Albans, your grace. He's here overseeing the installation. Your workers push you forward, and suddenly you find yourself standing before the King of England. You drop to one knee, head bowed. Or rise, carpenter, Edward says, his voice deep and commanding. You have skillful hands. What is your name? Thomas Wells, your grace. Your own voice sounds strange in your ears, tight with anxiety. Master Wells, the king studies you with intelligent blue eyes. The carvings on this table, hunting scenes with remarkable detail. You know your craft well. Thank you, your grace. Pride swells in your chest at the royal compliment. Edward turns to his companions, among them a slightly built man with dark, watchful eyes, whom you recognize from descriptions as the king's youngest brother, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. "We shall dine here tonight," the king announces. "Let us see if this table is as functional as it is beautiful." You're dismissed with another nod of approval, backing away with a bow as the royal party continues their tour of the lodge. It's a brief encounter, but one you know. You'll recount to your grandchildren someday. Back in St. Albans, your royal commission brings increased status and business. Your workshop expands further, and by 1478, you're among the town's more prosperous citizens. You and Mary purchase a larger home, stone-built as she'd hoped, with separate bedrooms for the children and a proper kitchen. William, now 9, shows aptitude for both numbers and woodworking. He divides his time between lessons with the Abbey's schoolmaster and helping in your workshop. Elizabeth, 7, is more interested in Mary's weaving, spending hours watching the complex patterns emerge on her mother's loom. Your family has grown again with the birth of another son, Robert, in 1477. The boy is still toddling, chubby-legged, and curious about everything, requiring constant supervision to keep him from misadventure. Life is good, but news from court occasionally disrupts the peaceful rhythm of your days. In 1478, a shocking scandal erupts when the king's brother, George, Duke of Clarence, is arrested for treason. Clarence has been a troublemaker for years, never quite reconciled to his brother's rule, despite Edward's repeated forgiveness of his betrayals. This time, however, Edward's patience has run out. Clarence is convicted by Parliament and sentenced to death. In February, word spreads that he was executed privately in the Tower of London, drowned, some say, in a bt of Malmsey wine, though few believe such a theatrical end. You discuss the news with Mary one evening after the children are asleep, sitting by the fire with cups of warmed cider. Brothers turning against brothers, Mary says, shaking her head. And not the first time in this royal family, you nod, remembering the conflicts between Edward and Clarence, and before them between Henry V, VI, and the Duke of York. Power does strange things to men's loyalties. The Duke of Gloucester remains faithful, at least Mary observes. They say he's the king's most trusted advisor. Now Richard, Duke of Gloucester, has indeed remained steadfastly loyal to Edward, serving as his brother's lieutenant in the north of England. Unlike the flamboyant Clarence, Richard is known for his sober administration and military competence. The years continue to pass in relative tranquility. Your business prospers, your children grow. William, approaching 13, is officially apprenticed to you, though he continues his studies with the Abbey schoolmaster. Elizabeth, at 11, helps Mary with household management, and has become skilled at embroidery, her nimble fingers creating intricate designs on linen and wool. Robert, now 5, follows his older brother around the workshop, already showing an interest in tools and woodcraft. In the spring of 1483, you're working on a commission for new choir stalls at the Abbey when Thomas, your former apprentice and now trusted foreman, bursts into the workshop. Master Wells, the king is dead. Your chisel slips, narrowly missing your thumb. What? How can that be? King Edward is not yet 41. Thomas is breathless, having run from the town square where the news was announced. They say he took ill suddenly, a chill that turned to fever. He died on April 9th at Westminster. The news stuns you. Edward IV has ruled for over 20 years of your adult life, except for those few months of Henry V/VI's redemption. His powerful presence seemed a permanent fixture of England, a force of nature rather than a mortal man. God rest his soul. You murmur, making the sign of the cross. What of the succession? His son is only 12. Prince Edward is to be King Edward the. Thomas confirms. But until he comes of age, there's to be a protector. The Queen's brother, Lord Rivers. You've heard of Anthony Woodville's influence at court. Thomas shakes his head. No, the Duke of Gloucester. The late king named his brother Richard as Lord Protector in his will. This makes sense. Richard has proven his loyalty and competence repeatedly. Still, a child king means uncertainty, something England has experienced before with disastrous results, when Henry VI inherited the throne as an infant. You closed the workshop early that day, walking home through streets already buzzing with speculation. People gather in small groups, exchanging what little information they have and wondering what changes the new reign might bring. At home, Mary meets you at the door, her face concerned. Is it true about the king? You nod, hanging your cloak on a peg. Yes, Prince Edward will be king with his uncle Gloucester as protector. Mary frowns, lowering her voice so the children can't hear. The Queen will not be pleased. She and her family have controlled access to the prince for years. Your wife has always had a keen understanding of politics. There may be conflict, you agree, but surely both sides want what's best for the boy and the kingdom. Events move quickly in the weeks that follow. The young king is traveling to London from Lalo in Wales, accompanied by his maternal uncle, Lord Rivers, and his half-brother, Sir Richard Grey. Meanwhile, the Duke of Gloucester is heading south from Yorkshire. On April 30th, news reaches St. Albans that Gloucester has intercepted the royal party at Stony Stratford, arrested Rivers and Grey, and taken custody of the young king. The Duke claims to have discovered a plot by the Woodville family to deny him his rightful position as protector. Queen Elizabeth, hearing of her brother's arrest, has fled into sanctuary at Westminster Abbey with her younger son, Richard, Duke of York, and her daughters. London is in turmoil as Gloucester brings the young king to the capital. You follow these events with growing concern, discussing them in hushed tones with Mary after the children are asleep. This reminds me too much of the early days of the wars. You confess one night unable to sleep despite your physical exhaustion from the day's work. Nobles positioning for power around a weak king. Mary places a comforting hand on your arm. Edward V is not Henry V, and Gloucester has always been loyal to his brother. True, you acknowledge, but power can tempt even the most steadfast man. Throughout May, conflicting rumors reach St. Albans. Some say Gloucester aims to take the throne himself. Others insist he's merely securing his position as protector against Woodville interference. The young king remains in the Tower of London, ostensibly preparing for his coronation, now scheduled for June 22nd. In early June, the Duke of York is removed from sanctuary to join his brother in the Tower, supposedly to keep the young king company before his coronation. But as the appointed date approaches, the coronation is suddenly postponed. Then on June 22nd, the very day Edward the Foy was to be crowned, a stunning announcement reaches St. Albans. Dr. Ralph Shea, a prominent preacher, has declared to the people of London that Edward IV's marriage to Elizabeth Woodville was invalid due to a pre-contract of marriage with another woman. This means Edward V and his brother are illegitimate, and have no right to the throne. Instead, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, is proclaimed the rightful king as the only legitimate adult male in the direct Yorkist line. On July the 6th, he is crowned Richard III in Westminster Abbey. The speed and completeness of this transformation leaves you bewildered. How can this be? You ask Thomas, who brings you daily updates from travelers passing through St. Albans. A month ago, Richard was protector for his nephew. Now he wears the crown himself. Thomas shrugs, equally confused. They say there's evidence Edward Thor was pre-contracted to marry Lady Elenina Butler before he wed Elizabeth Woodville. If true, his marriage to the Queen was bigots and their children illegitimate. And the young princes, Edward and his brother, still in the Tower, but no longer visible, some say for their own protection. You think of your own sons, William, now 14, Robert 7, and feel a chill despite the summer heat. Royal blood has proven dangerous in these uncertain times. Richard III's early reign seems stable enough. He embarks on a royal progress through the Midlands and North, showing himself to his subjects and consolidating support. His wife, Anne Neville, is crowned Queen, and their son, Edward, is named Prince of Wales. But questions about the young princes in the Tower persist. No one has seen them since June, and rumors begin to circulate that they have met with foul play. By autumn, these whispers have grown louder, damaging Richard's reputation, even as he works to establish his rule. In October, more troubling news arrives. The Duke of Buckingham, initially one of Richard's strongest supporters, has rebelled against the new king. The rebellion is quickly suppressed, and Buckingham is executed, but its very existence suggests deeper discontent with Richard's seizure of power. More concerning still, the rebellion appears to have been coordinated with an attempted invasion by Henry Tudor, Earl of Richmond, a distant Lancastrian claimant living in exile in Brittany. Though Tudor's landing was aborted due to storms, his emergence as a rival claimant adds a new dimension to England's political landscape. The winter of 1483-1484 is harsh with heavy snowfall and bitter cold. Work slows at your workshop as people conserve resources for essentials. You dismiss 2 journeymen with promises to rehire them in spring, keeping only Thomas and your son William, now a skilled apprentice despite his youth. One evening in January, as you sit by the fire in your home, repairing a child's wooden horse for Robert, there's an unexpected knock at your door. William answers it, returning moments later with a troubled expression. "Father, there's a man asking for you." He wears the livery of Sir James Tyrrell. You set aside your work, curious about this late visitor. Sir James Tyrrell has risen high in King Richard's service, becoming one of his trusted knights. You haven't heard from him since completing a commission for his manor house years ago. The visitor is a thin, nervous man who glances repeatedly over his shoulder as if fearing pursuit. "Master Wells?" Sir James sends his greetings. "He requires your services for a delicate matter." "What sort of matter?" you ask immediately, weary. The man lowers his voice. "2 coffins, Master Carpenter." "Small ones?" "For children. They must be made with the utmost discretion and delivered to the Tower of London within 3 days. A cold weight settles in your stomach. "Children, I know nothing more," the man insists, though his eyes suggest otherwise. Sir James offers triple your usual rate for speed and silence. After the messenger leaves, you sit heavily in your chair, the implications of the request overwhelming you. Could these coffins be meant for the princes in the Tower? Has Richard indeed eliminated his nephews to secure his throne? Mary finds you still sitting there an hour later, lost in troubled thoughts. You share the strange commission with her, watching her face pale with understanding. "You cannot do this," she whispers fiercely. "If what we suspect is true, those poor boys, you cannot be part of concealing such a crime." You nod slowly. "I'll send word tomorrow that we're too busy with prior commitments." But even refusing the commission doesn't free you from the knowledge it implies. Sleep eludes you that night as you wonder about the fate of 2 young boys whose only crime was their royal blood. The year 1484 passes in a strange limbo. Richard III works to establish his legitimacy, calling Parliament to ratify his claim and instituting popular legal reforms. Yet rumors about the princes persist, undermining public confidence in the king. In April, Richard suffers a devastating personal blow when his only son, Edward of Midham, dies suddenly at age 10. The king and queen are reportedly grief-stricken, and you feel genuine sympathy despite your suspicions about Richard's actions. The death of a child is a sorrow no parent should bear, king or commoner. Queen Anne follows her son to the grave in March 1485, succumbing to what some call consumption and others attribute to grief. Malicious rumors suggest Richard poisoned her, intending to marry his niece Elizabeth of York to strengthen his claim to the throne. Though you find these accusations far-fetched, they indicate how deeply public opinion has turned against the king. By summer, news arrives that Henry Tudor is planning another invasion. This time with significant backing from the French. Richard calls for troops from throughout the kingdom, preparing to meet this threat to his crown. In early August, Tudor lands in Wales with a small army of English exiles and French mercenaries. More concerning for Richard, many Welsh men flock to Tudor's banner, drawn by his Welsh ancestry through his father, Edmund Tudor. Richard marches west to intercept the invaders, gathering forces as he goes. His army is larger than Tudor, but there are questions about the loyalty of some of his nobles, particularly Thomas Stanley, whose wife Margaret Bowett is Henry Tudor's mother. On August 22, 1485, the armies meet near the small town of Market Bosworth in Leicester. The outcome seems assured given Richard's superior numbers, but fate or treachery intervenes. The news of Bosworth Field reaches St. Albans 2 days later. Richard III is dead, killed while fighting bravely in a last desperate charge toward Henry Tudor himself. The Stanleys holding back their forces until the critical moment through their support to Tudor, tipping the battle decisively in his favor. The last Yorkist king is gone, and Henry Tudor is proclaimed King Henry VII on the battlefield. The Wars of the Roses, which have shaped the backdrop of your entire adult life, have finally ended with the emergence of a new dynasty. You're 54 now, your dark hair and beard more gray than brown. William, 17, is nearing the end of his apprenticeship and will soon be ready to take over more of the business. Elizabeth, 15, is betrothed to the son of a prosperous merchant from London. Robert, 10, divides his time between school lessons and playing with wooden swords, dreaming of adventures he's fortunate enough to experience only in imagination. On a crisp October morning, you stand with your family among the crowds lining the road into St. Albans. King Henry VII is making a progress through his new kingdom, and today he passes through your town. The royal procession is impressive with banners bearing the new Tudor emblem, a red rose and white rose combined, symbolizing the union of Lancaster and York through Henry's promised marriage to Elizabeth of York, Edward IV's daughter. Henry himself is not what you expected. At 28, he lacks the physical majesty of Edward or the dark intensity of Richard III. He's tall but slender with a serious, watchful face that rarely smiles. This is a man who spent his formative years in exile, always looking over his shoulder, always calculating his next move. As the new king passes, you bow along with everyone else. William, standing beside you, whispers, "Do you think the wars are truly over, father?" You consider the question carefully. Henry Tudor has a weaker claim than any king in living memory. But he's shrewd, and his planned marriage to Elizabeth of York will unite the rival houses. If he rules justly and produces heirs, perhaps England can indeed know peace. That evening, as your family shares a simple meal of bread, cheese, and stewed vegetables, you reflect on the tumultuous decades you've lived through. From the Battle of St. Albans in 1455 to Bosworth Field 30 years later, you've witnessed the rise and fall of kings, the shifting fortunes of great nobles, and through it all, the resilience of ordinary people like yourself. "What are you thinking of, husband?" Mary asks, noticing your contemplative mood. Though her dark hair now shows strands of silver and laugh lines mark the corners of her eyes, she's still the practical, warm-hearted woman you married nearly 20 years ago. The past, you admit, and how fortunate we've been to build this life despite the kingdom's troubles. After supper, you sit by the fire with Robert, helping him whittle a small wooden horse, while William and Elizabeth clear the table. Your hands, lead now with arthritis, but still strong and skilled, guide your son's smaller ones on the knife. Careful now, you instruct. Let the grain of the wood guide your blade, not force it where it doesn't want to go. Robert's tongue protrudes slightly from the corner of his mouth as he concentrates. Like this, father? Just so you approve, watching the shape emerge from the block of pine. Later, when the children have gone to bed, you and Mary sit together by the dying fire. The autumn evening has turned cool, and you pull your woolen cloak more tightly around your shoulders. "I never thought to live through the reigns of 5 kings, you murmur, watching the embers glow. Mary takes your hand, her fingers warm against yours. "And may young King Henry's reign be long and peaceful for our children's sake." You nod, feeling the weight of the day's exertions in your bones, for their sake indeed. As you bank the fire for the night and prepare for bed, you feel a deep contentment. Despite the aches in your joints and the knowledge of your advancing years, you've built something lasting. Your business, your family, your reputation as a master craftsman. Through all of England's upheavals, these things have remained. In your bedchamber, you remove your shoes and outer garments before slipping beneath the woolen blankets. Mary joins you moments later, her familiar weight settling beside you on the mattress. Outside, an owl hoots softly and distant church bells toll the late hour. Your body relaxes into the bed, muscles unwinding after the day's labor. though you know England's story will continue to unfold with challenges yet to come for the new Tudor dynasty. Tonight there is just this quiet room, your wife's steady breathing beside you, and the knowledge that your children sleep safely under your roof. Your eyelids grow heavy as sleep approaches. The last thought that drifts through your mind before consciousness fades is a simple prayer of gratitude for the peace that has come at last to your corner of the realm, and the hope that it might endure for generations to come. The winter of 1485 brings bitter cold that seeps through the walls of even the sturdiest homes in St. Albans. You feel it especially in your hands these days, the joints stiffening painfully in the morning until you've worked them loose. At 54 you notice these small betrayals of your body more frequently. The ache in your back after a long day at the workbench. The way your eyes strain to see fine details in dim light. You've taken to having William handle more of the intricate carving work. His young eyes and steady hands better suited to the task now. Your eldest son has grown into a skilled craftsman, his work sometimes surpassing your own. At 18, he's a man now, tall and broad-shouldered, with your same serious expression when concentrating on his craft. On this frosty January morning, you're both working on a set of chairs for the mayor's new dining hall when Thomas rushes into the workshop, cheeks flushed from the cold. "Have you heard the news?" he asks, warming his hands at the small brazier that heats the space. "The king is to marry Elizabeth of York at Westminster Abbey in 2 weeks' time." The announcement isn't unexpected. Henry Tudor had pledged to marry Edward IV's daughter even before invading England. But the timing is significant. Nearly 6 months have passed since Bosworth Field. Time enough for Henry to secure his position before fulfilling this crucial promise. "Good news for the kingdom," you reply, brushing wood shavings from your apron. A union of York and Lancaster may finally put an end to these wars. William looks up from his work. "Is that why the king's new badge shows red and white roses combined?" You nod. A clever symbol. The Tudor rose they're calling it. Later that evening, as your family gathers around the table for the evening meal, conversation turns to the royal wedding. Mary ladles out a thick pottage of barley and vegetables, the steam rising in the cold air of your kitchen. "Will there be celebrations here in St. Albans?" asks Elizabeth, now 16 and increasingly interested in any excuse for festivity. Her betrothal to the London merchant's son has been formalized. The wedding set for spring. The Abbey will hold a special mass, you tell her. And I've heard the mayor plans to distribute bread and ale in the market square. Robert at 11 is more concerned with immediate matters. Will the shops close? Will there be no work that day? You smile at your youngest son's practical question. Yes, it will be a holiday, though we have much to finish before then. Mary gives you a concerned look across the table. You've been working too hard in this cold. Your hands were troubling you this morning. It's nothing, you insist, though you flex your fingers unconsciously. Just the winter weather. In truth, the arthritis that plagues many craftsmen has begun to make itself known in your knuckles and wrists. Years of gripping tools, planing wood, and lifting heavy timber have taken their toll. But you're not ready to set aside your craft entirely. Not while you can still hold the chisel. On January 18, 1486, Henry VII marries Elizabeth of York at Westminster Abbey. The news reaches St. Albans the following day along with reports of the magnificent ceremony and celebrations in London. As promised, the mayor distributes food and drink in the market square, and the Abbey bells ring joyously throughout the day. You attend the special mass with your family, all in your best clothes. The Abbey is packed with townsfolk, their breath visible in the cold air despite the many candles burning at the altar. The abbot speaks of unity and peace, themes that resonate after decades of conflict. Walking home afterward, Mary's arm linked with yours. You reflect on how many changes you've witnessed in your lifetime. From the weak rule of Henry V/6 to the charismatic Edward for the brief and controversial reign of Richard III, and now this new Tudor king whose claim rests more on conquest than blood. What are you thinking of? Mary asks, noticing your pensive expression. How England has changed since I was a boy, you reply. 5 kings I've lived under now. 6 if you count Edward V, though he was never crowned. Mary squeezes your arm gently. And let us pray this one reigns long and peacefully. I've seen enough turmoil for one lifetime. You nod in agreement. Though Henry Tudor's claim to the throne is tenuous based on his Buffett ancestry from John of Gaunt's third marriage, a line specifically barred from succession, his victory at Bosworth, and now his marriage to Elizabeth of York have given him practical legitimacy. Spring arrives, bringing with it Elizabeth's wedding. The ceremony is held at St. at Albans Abbey, grander than most town weddings due to the prominence of the groom's family. Your daughter, lovely in a gown of deep blue wool with embroidery Mary spent months perfecting, moves to London with her new husband to begin her married life. The parting is bittersweet. You're proud of the match. Simon Foster is a well-respected cloth merchant with a growing business. But the absence of Elizabeth's cheerful presence leaves your home quieter. Mary weeps after the newlyweds depart, though she tries to hide her tears. She'll visit often, you comfort her. London is not so far. I know, Mary says, wiping her eyes. It's the way of things. Children grow and leave, but it doesn't make it easier. The summer brings good news. Queen Elizabeth is with child. The kingdom prays for a male heir who would strengthen Henry's position immeasurably. After years of uncertainty over succession, a clear line of inheritance would provide welcome stability. Your business continues to thrive, though you increasingly leave the physical labor to William and your other workers. Instead, you focus on design, client meetings, and managing the finances. Your reputation has spread beyond Hertfordshire, bringing commissions from as far as London and Oxford. One such commission comes from Magdalene College in Oxford, new choir stalls for their chapel. You travel there in June with William to take measurements and discuss the designs with the college ex-bursar. The journey is tiring, your joints protesting the days on horseback. But the project is prestigious and lucrative. Returning to St. Albans, you're greeted by Mary with troubling news. During your absence, rumors have reached town of a Yorkist plot against the king. A priest named Richard Simons has presented a boy he claims is Edward Earl of Warwick, the son of George, Duke of Clarence, and therefore a Yorkist claimant to the throne. The real Earl of Warwick is imprisoned in the Tower, you say, frowning. This must be an impostor. Mary nods. That's what most believe. They're calling the boy Lambert Simnel, but he's gained support in Ireland, and there's talk of an invasion. The threat materializes in June 1487. Lambert Simnel is crowned King Edward VI in Dublin, supported by the Earl of Lincoln, a nephew of Edward IV, and a force of German mercenaries provided by Margaret of Burgundy, Edward IV's sister, who remains a committed Yorkist. The rebels land in Lanarkshire and march south, gathering some support along the way. King Henry moves to intercept them, and on June 16th, the armies meet at East Stoke near Newark. The battle is decisive. The rebel force is destroyed, Lincoln killed, and Simnel captured. In a show of either mercy or contempt, Henry spares the boy's life, recognizing he was merely a puppet in other schemes. Simnel is given a position as a scullion in the royal kitchens, a humiliating but survivable fate. The rebellion defeated, Henry takes steps to secure his position. He has the real Earl of Warwick paraded through London streets to prove the pretender false. He also finally arranges for Elizabeth's coronation as queen, perhaps recognizing that elevating her status helps reinforce his own legitimacy. On September 19, 1487, Queen Elizabeth gives birth to a son named Arthur after the legendary king. Celebrations erupt throughout the realm, bells ringing and bonfires lit to mark the arrival of a Tudor heir. In St. Albans, as elsewhere, people take to the streets in spontaneous revelry, grateful for this sign of dynastic continuity. You celebrate more quietly at home, raising a cup of ale with William and Robert. To Prince Arthur you toast, "May he grow to be a wise and just king, after his father's long reign," adds Mary, always practical. The prince's birth and the defeat of Simnel's rebellion mark a turning point in Henry VII's rule. His position grows more secure, though he remains vigilant against potential threats. The king institutes strict financial policies, building up the royal treasury, depleted by years of war, while keeping the nobility in check through heavy bonds and fines. In 1489, William marries Agnes, the daughter of a local merchant. They move into a small house near your workshop, and within a year, your first grandchild is born. A boy they named Thomas after your loyal foreman who died peacefully in his sleep that winter. Holding your grandson, a tiny bundle with William's dark eyes, you feel a profound sense of continuity. Your own hands, now gnarled and spotted with age, seem enormous against his perfect miniature fingers. He has a carpenter's hands, you tell William proudly, strong and precise. Life settles into a comfortable pattern. Your workshop, now effectively managed by William, though still bearing your name, continues to prosper. Robert at 15 divides his time between carpentry training and assisting the Abbey's almoner, having shown an aptitude for numbers and record-keeping. Elizabeth visits from London when she can, bringing her own children, a girl and a boy now. Her husband's business has grown and they live well in a 3-story house near St. Paul's. Mary travels to stay with them occasionally, especially in winter when your arthritis makes you poor company. In 1491, the royal family grows again with the birth of Prince Henry, a robust boy who, unlike his more delicate older brother, seems to radiate health and vitality from his earliest days. A daughter Margaret follows in 1492 further, securing the Tudor line. But the spectre of Yorkist opposition hasn't disappeared entirely. In 1491, reports emerge of another young man claiming to be Richard, Duke of York, the younger of the princes in the Tower. This pretender, later identified as Perkin Warbeck, gains recognition from various European monarchs eager to undermine Henry II. Unlike Simnel, Warbeck proves a persistent threat, attempting invasions in 1495 and 1497 before finally being captured. Initially treated with surprising leniency, he eventually tries to escape with the Earl of Warwick. This final act exhausts Henry's patience, and both men are executed in 1499, ending the last significant Yorkist threat to Tudor rule. By the turn of the century, you've reached your 70th year, an age few men attain. Your body has grown frail, your once strong frame now stooped and thin. The arthritis in your hands has worsened to the point where you can no longer hold tools, though you still visit the workshop daily, offering advice and wisdom to William and his growing number of apprentices. Your mind remains sharp, however, and you take pleasure in teaching your grandchildren about wood, its grains and textures, its strengths and vulnerabilities. Little Thomas, now 10, shows particular aptitude, spending hours at your side, learning to identify different types of timber by sight and smell alone. On a warm summer evening in 1502, you sit in the garden behind your home, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Mary brings you a cup of watered wine and settles beside you on the bench. Her own movements slower now, her dark hair entirely silver. A messenger came from Elizabeth today, she says. Sad news from London. Prince Arthur has died. You turn to her in shock. The king's heir. But he was just married. Arthur had recently wed Catherine of Aragon, daughter of the Spanish monarchs, in a magnificent ceremony meant to elevate England's international standing. Mary nods, her face solemn. A sudden illness took him. He was only 15. Elizabeth says. The court is in deep mourning. The Queen especially. You shake your head, thinking of your own children and grandchildren, all blessedly alive and well. Poor Catherine, widowed so young, and the King and Queen. To lose a child is the greatest sorrow. Prince Henry is now heir. Mary observes. God willing, he'll grow to be a strong king. You nod, though you know you're unlikely to live to see the young prince's reign. Henry VII, despite occasional bouts of illness, seems firmly in control of his kingdom. His position more secure than at any time since his accession. The following spring brings your own personal loss. Mary, your companion of nearly 40 years, falls ill with a fever that the physician cannot break. 4 days you sit by her bedside, holding her hand as she drifts in and out of consciousness. Your children and grandchildren taking turns, keeping vigil. On a bright April morning, Mary opens her eyes. Suddenly lucid, she squeezes your hand with surprising strength. Thomas, she whispers, using your given name rather than husband, as she usually does. You've been a good man. I've been fortunate in you and I in you, you reply, throat tight with unshed tears. Rest now. Save your strength. She smiles faintly. We both know I'm not long for this world. Don't grieve over much. I'll wait for you, but don't hurry to join me. Before sunset, she's gone, slipping away so quietly you almost don't notice the moment of her passing. Only the stillness of her chest and the cooling of her hand in yours signal that she's left you. The funeral is held at the Abbey where you've worked your entire life. Elizabeth travels from London, heavily pregnant with her third child. William and Agnes stand close beside you, supporting you physically and emotionally. Robert, now in minor orders at the Abbey, assists with the service, his young face solemn beneath his tonsure. Without Mary, your home feels empty despite Robert's continued presence. You find yourself spending more time at William's house, surrounded by the cheerful chaos of your grandchildren. Little Thomas especially seems to sense your loneliness, often sitting quietly beside you, asking questions about your youth and the many changes you've witnessed. Is it true you saw the first battle of the Wars of the Roses, grandfather? He asks one evening as you sit by the fire, your gnarled hands stretched toward the warmth. I did, you reply, memory taking you back across the decades to 1455. I was just an apprentice then, younger than you are now. The fighting happened right here in St. Albans. Tell me about it, he urges, eyes wide with interest about all of it, the wars, the kings you've known. And so you begin to share your story, recounting the events that have shaped your life and the kingdom. You tell him of Henry V's 6th's weakness and eventual madness, of Edward IV's charismatic rule, of Richard III's controversial seizure of power, and of Henry VII's careful consolidation of Tudor authority. 5 kings I've lived under, you tell him, echoing words you once spoke to Mary. 6 counting young Edward V who was never crowned. And I've seen England torn apart by war and slowly mended again under Tudor rule. Thomas listens intently, occasionally asking questions that surprise you with their insight. It seems to me, he says thoughtfully, that strong kings bring peace, while weak ones invite trouble from ambitious nobles. You nod, impressed by his understanding. That's the heart of it, lad. England needs a firm hand on the tiller, but one that governs justly. In April 1509, news reaches St. Albans that King Henry VI has died after a lengthy illness. His son, the 17-year-old Henry VIII, accedes to the throne without opposition, a peaceful transition that would have seemed impossible during the turbulent years of your youth. You received the news with quiet reflection. Henry VII, for all his flaws, his avarice, his suspicion, his sometimes harsh justice, brought stability to England after decades of civil war. He rebuilt the treasury, strengthened royal authority, and secured the Tudor dynasty through his children and their marriages. A new age begins, you murmur to yourself, sitting in the garden where you once watched sunsets with Mary. Your own time is drawing to a close. At 78, you've lived far longer than most, witnessing history that spans from the First Battle of St. Albans to the accession of the second Tudor king. Your body grows weaker with each passing season, though your mind remains clear, a repository of memories stretching back across the decades. In the summer of 159, Elizabeth visits from London, bringing news of the new king's marriage to Catherine of Aragon, his brother's widow, and the lavish coronation that followed. She finds you in the garden, dozing in the warm sunlight. Father, she says gently, sitting beside you, you should come live with us in London. Robert worries about you being alone, and so do William and I. You shake your head, smiling at your daughter. Though in her late 30s now, with strands of gray in her dark hair, you still see the little girl who used to watch wide-eyed as you carved animals from scraps of wood. This is my home, child. I've lived in St. Albans all my life. It's where your mother rests, where my memories dwell. William and Agnes check on me daily, and Robert visits from the Abbey most evenings. Elizabeth sighs but doesn't press the issue. Instead, she tells you of her children, her daughter now betrothed, her sons learning the cloth trade under their father's guidance. Her life in London is full and prosperous, a fact that brings you quiet satisfaction. When she returns to London a week later, you embrace her tightly, both of you aware it may be the last time. "Be well, my dear one," you whisper. "You've been a joy to me from your first breath." The autumn brings a lingering cough that never quite clears, leaving you breathless after even mild exertion. By winter, you rarely leave your bed, your once strong body now frail and wasted. William, Agnes, and Robert take turns caring for you, ensuring you're never alone. On a cold January morning in 1510, you wake feeling strangely energized. The persistent pain in your joints has subsided, and your mind feels exceptionally clear. When Robert brings your morning porridge, you ask him to help you to your chair by the window. "I want to see the winter sunlight on the Abbey," you explain. "It's been too long since I've really looked at it." Concerned but unable to deny your request, Robert carefully helps you from bed to chair, wrapping a warm blanket around your shoulders. Through the window, you can see the magnificent Abbey where you've worked your entire life, its stone walls glowing golden in the morning light. Throughout the day, you remain unusually alert, asking for paper and ink to record some final instructions regarding your modest estate. You speak of Mary, often recalling moments from your long marriage with surprising clarity. As evening approaches, little Thomas arrives with William. The boy, now 12, has been working in the workshop after his school lessons, showing remarkable skill with tools despite his youth. "Come, lad," you call weakly. "Sit with me a while." Thomas approaches, his expression solemn beyond his years. He takes your withered hand in his young strong one. A carpenter's hand, as you once predicted. "I've been thinking about what you asked me last week." You tell him about which king was the greatest of those I've known. Thomas nods eagerly. "You said you needed time to consider?" "I've had that time now." You pause, gathering your thoughts. Each had his strengths and weaknesses. Henry V was kind but weak. Edward IV charismatic but indulgent. Richard III intelligent, but ruthless. Henry VII prudent but cold. And which was best for England? Thomas asks. You smile faintly. England needed different qualities at different times. But perhaps the best king I witnessed was Edward IV during his second reign, when he combined strength with wisdom earned through earlier mistakes. As darkness falls, your family gathers around you, sensing the approaching end. Robert holds a candle, its gentle light illuminating the faces you love. William, serious and steady. Agnes, kind and practical. Robert, scholarly yet compassionate. And young Thomas, the future of your craft and family. And I've been fortunate, you tell them, your voice barely above a whisper, to have lived so long, to have seen England emerge from darkness into a time of peace, to have created things of beauty with my hands, to have loved and been loved. Your gaze drifts past them to a corner of the room where for a moment you fancy you see Mary waiting, looking as she did when you first married her, dark-haired and bright-eyed. Hand extended toward you. I'm coming, my love. You murmur, your own hand lifting slightly from the blanket as your family watches, tears flowing freely now. Your breathing slows and finally stops. Your eyes close for the last time, your features relaxing into a peaceful expression that looks almost like a smile. Outside, snow begins to fall, covering St. Albans in a gentle white blanket. The Wars of the Roses are long over, their bloody battles fading into history and legend. England stands at the beginning of what will become known as the Tudor Age, a time of relative stability, cultural flowering, and growing national identity. Your body will return to the earth in the Abbey graveyard beside Mary's. But something of you lives on in the wooden beams and panels of buildings throughout Hertfordshire, in the skills passed down to William and Thomas, in the stories your family will tell for generations to come. And perhaps as your soul departs, you catch one final glimpse of England, the realm whose turbulent history formed the backdrop of your life. Now at peace under a strong young king, the white rose and red united at last. The scent of freshly cut oak fills the workshop as you guide your chisel along the marked line, creating a perfect groove in the wood beneath your hands. You are Thomas Wells, 20 years old now, master carpenter of St. Albans, following in the footsteps of your father William and grandfather before him. 8 years have passed since your grandfather's death in that quiet room, snow falling outside the window as he spoke his final words to your family. You still miss his gentle guidance and the stories he would tell of England's turbulent past. Tales of battles and kings that spanned his remarkable life from the first clash at St. Albans to the dawn of the Tudor Age. It's the summer of 1518, and England has changed in ways your grandfather could scarcely have imagined. The young King Henry VIII, now in his 9th year on the throne, has transformed the somber, cautious court of his father into one of Europe's most magnificent centers of pageantry, learning, and ambition. Master Thomas, your youngest apprentice, Richard, appears at the workshop door. A messenger from London. You set down your tools and wipe your hands on your apron. The messenger, dusty from travel, bears the livery of your Aunt Elizabeth's husband, the prosperous cloth merchant, Simon Foster. Master Wells, he says with a slight bow. Your aunt sends word that the royal household requires furnishings for the king's new apartments at Greenwich Palace. Master Foster suggested your workshop might fulfill part of the commission. Your heart quickens. A royal commission would bring prestige to your business and confirm your reputation beyond Hertfordshire. Your grandfather received such an honor under Edward IV, and now the opportunity has come to you under the second Tudor king. Please convey my thanks to Master Foster, you reply, maintaining a composed exterior despite your excitement. I shall travel to London next week to discuss the details. After the messenger departs, you call your journeymen together. We've been offered a royal commission, you announce. We'll need to prepare our finest designs and samples to present in London. The workshop buzzes with excitement for the rest of the day. You think of your grandfather, and how proud he would be to see the family business continuing to thrive, especially with such an illustrious commission. That evening, you walk the familiar path to St. Albans Abbey, where your brother Robert serves as a priest. The massive stone building glows golden in the setting sun, just as it did on the morning of your grandfather's death. Inside, the cool air carries the scent of incense and beeswax candles. You find Robert in the Abbey library, his taunched head bent over an ancient manuscript. At 28, he has a scholarly demeanor that suits his vocation, though you both share the same dark eyes inherited from your grandmother, Mary. Thomas, he greets you warmly. What brings you here this evening? You tell him about the royal commission, and his face lights up with pleasure. Grandfather would be proud, he says, echoing your earlier thoughts. Have you told father? I'm going there now, you reply. I wanted to ask if you've heard anything about the king's taste from your London contacts. Robert's position at the Abbey connects him with churchmen throughout England, including some with court connections. He considers your question thoughtfully. King Henry favors the new Renaissance styles from Italy. He says, Cardinal Wolsey has brought Italian craftsmen to work on his own residences. The king admires Wolsey's taste and often seeks to surpass it. You nod, making mental note. Your grandfather trained you in traditional English woodworking, but you've been studying the newer continental styles, collecting drawings and descriptions whenever possible. Later, at your father's house, you share the news over a simple supper of bread, cheese, and summer vegetables. William Wells, now 50, his dark hair strewn with silver, listens with pride evident in his eyes. A royal commission, he says, nodding approvingly. The Wells name continues to grow in reputation. Your stepmother Agnes serves you a cup of ale. Will you be staying in London long? She asks. A week, perhaps longer, if the commission is confirmed. You reply. I'll stay with Aunt Elizabeth and Uncle Simon. Your father looks thoughtful. Take care in London. The sweating sickness has returned in some parishes. The sweating sickness, a mysterious and often fatal illness that strikes suddenly, has periodically ravaged England since before you were born. The mention dampens your excitement slightly, but not your resolve. I'll be careful, you promise. But this opportunity is too important to miss. The following week finds you in London, a city transformed since your last visit 3 years ago. New buildings rise everywhere, and the streets teem with people speaking a dozen different languages. The wealth flowing into England under Henry VIII rule is evident in the fine clothes worn by merchants and courtiers alike. Your aunt and uncle's home near St. Paul's has grown more luxurious with each passing year. Uncle Simon's cloth business has prospered enormously, partly through contracts to supply the king's increasingly extravagant court. Thomas, and Elizabeth embraces you warmly. Though approaching 50, she remains handsome. Her dark hair now strewn with silver like your father's, arranged elegantly beneath a French-style hood. How you've grown to resemble your grandfather. The comparison pleases you. People often remark on the resemblance, though you lack the height and breadth of shoulder that your grandfather possessed in his prime. Over supper, Uncle Simon explains the royal commission in greater detail. The king is refurbishing several chambers at Greenwich. Cardinal Wolsey recommended Italian designs, but the king wants English craftsmen to execute them. A matter of pride, I believe. What sort of pieces are required, you ask? Bed frames, tables, chairs, storage. Chests, he replies. But they must incorporate classical motifs. Anthus leaves, Roman arches, that sort of thing. Can your workshop manage such designs? You nod confidently. I've been studying Italian pattern books. We can adapt our techniques to these new styles. The next morning, you accompany your uncle to Greenwich Palace, carrying a portfolio of designs and small wooden samples showing different sea